You are officially invited. Yes, you. You're invited to join us in Fertility Awareness Mastery. This is my 10-week group program designed to help you gain confidence using fertility awareness. Whether you're actively avoiding pregnancy or looking to optimize your chances of conception, either now or in the near future, we have a spot for you. We start in January. Are you ready to jump in? Head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program to register today. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 287. Welcome to the Fertility Friday podcast, your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm your host, Lisa Hendrickson-Jack. I'm the author of The Fifth Vital Sign and the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Journal. I'm a certified fertility awareness educator and holistic reproductive health practitioner with nearly 20 years of experience teaching women to connect to their fifth vital sign through menstrual cycle charting, balancing hormonal health, and optimizing the menstrual cycle without hormones. I'm outspoken about hormonal birth control and its impact on fertility and overall health because you have the right to know how your body works and how artificial hormones disrupt that natural process. I host live coaching programs to help you achieve optimal fertility and health because it's important to have healthy menstrual cycles regardless of whether or not you want to have babies. I'm also a wife and mother of 2 beautiful boys. I know, I'm a busy girl, but I managed to fit it all in. This podcast is designed to empower you to take full control of your cycles, your fertility, and your overall health. And I'm so excited that you're here with us today. I'm excited to share my interview today with you. I know I always say that, but in today's episode, I'm sharing my interview with Denise Wiesner, the author of her new book, Conceiving with Love. And in today's episode, we're talking all about sex and pleasure and really adding that aspect back into it. And in particular, for those of you who are listening who have struggled with fertility challenges and sex has come to mean something a little bit different in your relationship, at least for a time, this episode really delves into how to bring some of that magic back in. And for anyone who's listened to the podcast for a while, you'll know that this is always an area that I really like to just bring some attention to, because after all, sex should be fun and enjoyable for both parties. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode with Denise. And today I'm very excited to be here with my guest, Denise Wiesner. Denise is an internationally recognized traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, specializing in the whole systems Chinese medicine approach to women's health, sexuality, and fertility. And since 1994, Denise has treated and helped women manage challenges from menstrual cycle disorders through menopause and from infertility to pregnancy, using a combination of acupuncture, diet, and lifestyle counseling, nutritional supplements, and Chinese herbs. Denise has helped thousands of couples navigate the tricky and often stressful journey towards fertility without losing their loving connection, which is what we'll be talking about today. So in today's episode, we'll be talking about sex, love, and pleasure, and of course, anything else that comes up, and why it's a really important aspect of trying to conceive and life in general. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Denise.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I love your show.
Well, thank you so much. I was just gushing over your book. So your new book is Conceiving with Love, and I really enjoyed reading it. I'm really excited to dive into it. I just feel like it's really important. Anybody who works directly with women who are struggling with fertility challenges quickly realizes how deeply that can impact a couple's intimate relationship. And so just to start us off, I'm really curious just to know about how you found yourself in this work, what inspired you to write this book and why you focused your practice in this area.
I love treating women, and I've loved treating women for a while. I mean, I went to China and had some gynecological condition and had it treated with herbs. So it really woke me up to how Chinese medicine is so important for treating women and women's health. And then I sort of became interested in fertility. I was pregnant with my first child and found out that I was a carrier of Tay-Sachs, which is a genetic disorder. And I was like, I'll get my husband tested. And it turns out we both were. And therefore, I had a 25% chance that the baby would have this kind of, it's like a deadly disease where the baby's missing an enzyme for development and would die. So that was a whole new world for me. And it turned out my first one was okay. I was very blessed and had him. And then I started the road of like, oh, I want a second one, and should be really easy to get pregnant and no problems. I'm healthy, except for this Tay-Sachs thing. So then I got pregnant and miscarried at 8 weeks. And then 3 months later, I got pregnant again and it was a Tay-Sachs baby. This time I had to terminate. And then I just had a really difficult time getting pregnant. And I started going to I'm an acupuncturist. So I went to acupuncturists and I went to naturopaths and I went to MDs and I, no one was really helping me. And at that moment, I had another miscarriage and took myself into the doctor and said, test my blood, test my thyroid. And it turned out I was low thyroid and that prevents you from getting pregnant. And no one had caught it. So I really decided there was a need to blend Western and Eastern. So that's like how I got into it. The sex part really became out of necessity because everybody was coming in and everyone wanted to get pregnant and no one was having sex. And some people were avoiding sex and then doing IVF instead of having sex because everything was so complicated. So there was a huge need to me to really talk about intimacy and sexuality and in light of making a baby.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that. I mean, in my work as a fertility awareness educator, I see the charts. So part of my role is obviously to ask all the questions, right? That's why that's why my clients hire me. So the first step is, okay, charting correctly, understanding when you're fertile, etc. And part of accurate charting is to mark down when the sex is happening. So I can't tell you how many times that I've confirmed with my clients, sometimes they don't want to write down the sex. Maybe they're a little bit, whether it's a lot of sex or a little bit of sex, they might be a little bit nervous about that. But when it's just one-on-one, it's like, okay, are you marking the sex? Yes, I am. Okay, where's the sex? And so I don't mean that in a flippant way. I just mean it as a very real thing that sometimes it's very strange as a practitioner to just have to address that, you know what I mean? Like, okay, we are identifying the fertile window and everything is good, but where's the sex? So I'd love to hear just a little bit more about your experience with that and what it is that is making it challenging for couples to find that level of intimacy.
Yeah, I think, it seems to me that the society is really busy. We're all very busy. I'm busy. I'm working, and at least people are very, very tired. And, we're also, it's another layer of this whole social media, right? Where we have to check our email before we go to bed and like, oh, who texted us? We have to return that call. So people are on, there's like not a lot of downtime and couples are busy. And really the biggest thing that I think gets in the way is work and tiredness. It is putting away all the electronics and really spending time together. We're so focused on making a living or having a baby. And I think that's one of the things in our society that really gets in the way.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, it's a real thing. So,
oh yeah,
speaking to anybody, as much as we might say we want to have more sex or have a more enjoyable sex life with our partners, quite literally finding the time to have sex, and not just finding the time to have sex, because sometimes we do find the time to have sex, but we don't make the time for an intimate experience because we feel that it would take too long or those types of things. So share with us just a little bit more about how you've supported clients to address that very real issue with our current society. Like, we're all super busy. I'm busy right now. We are, both of us are currently working. We're both busy.
We're busy.
We're obviously not having sex right now.
But we will soon, right?
Yes.
This idea of pleasure and receiving pleasure, it's not just about like penis and vagina, right? Doing it. It's actually what you just said. It's the intimacy part. It's what leads up to wanting to be with your partner, because maybe you've talked to them during the day and you've sent cute little texts or little videos of yourself, or you've just set the stage. You've made your house, your room, like a special place. You've changed it up. But honestly, I was telling you, I was writing an article last night and I was talking to my mom about it, right? And I had all these simple things for people to do. And she was like, Denise, this is kind of boring. And I said, but mom, you don't understand. People are forgetting the simple things. They have to be reminded. I tell people like, yeah, light a candle in your room, change the ambiance, put on some music, maybe dance together. When's the last time you had like a really deep embrace, like a naked embrace for a long time with your partner? When's the last time you made out? These are like kind of basic stuff, but people forget. They're like, oh, I don't know. When's the last time I kissed my partner? It really, we're so focused on people are so focused on that like intercourse thing that they forget about all like touching and massaging and how we can really spend that time. It takes like 20 to 45 minutes, they say, for women to become aroused, right? That's a long time. So a lot of women tell me they have no sex drive. It's the little box that gets checked, no sex drive. And probably about, I'd say 90% of the women that come into my door. That's a lot. It's like, what is it that's causing this low sex drive? Is it like tiredness? Yes. But I think a lot of it is there's no like arousal. There's no like, ooh, I can't wait to see my person like I did in the beginning when I met them. Yeah. Like we have to recreate those exciting oxytocin and all those exciting hormones that get stimulated when we meet our partner in the beginning. We have to recreate those.
Well, I have a question for you, and I'm thinking of how to word it. But what you mentioned is one of I think the biggest challenges. The word sex is synonymous with penis and vagina intercourse. And it's all focused on what the penis likes, what makes the penis happy. And a lot of women just fall into that situation where sex becomes something they do for their partner. And it's around what your partner likes and what is going to make the penis happy. So how do you, for couples, and like everything else in life, we all fall into habits. So I've spoken to a number of women, both in my professional and personal life, where sex becomes the thing that you check off the box. Because as a woman, there's all these things. You have to have your career good. You've got to, you've got to be eating healthy. Now you got to chart your cycles. You got to get your hair done. You got to look nice. You got to work out. So there's all these boxes we have to check. And sex is one of those boxes. I feel like sex just becomes a box that we check. But I suppose I'm trying to think of how to word the question, but how do we get from sex being about what makes the penis happy to getting back into our bodies and allowing ourselves as women to really focus on our own pleasure and what makes the vulva happy?
Right. I think that you said it, so you really did say it correctly. It's about pleasure. And sometimes women don't even know what they like, right? It's this exploration, and you can do it solely. You can find out what you like as a woman by solo practice, right? Masturbation, it's not a crime. And touching yourself and figuring out like, wow, I like to be touched like this, or I like it softer. And then the trick is to communicate that to your partner. So what happens is people are afraid to talk about sex because there's so much shame, right? It's like you can talk about everything, maybe not money, but you talk about everything, and then it's like what you like sexually, people freeze, and then they just let their partner touch them in a certain way that they don't really like, but they just don't say anything. And so the partner thinks, oh, my woman likes to be touched like this, and they continue to touch like this, but the woman doesn't really like it, and then no one communicates, right? So no one learns. I think it's a matter of how do we want to communicate to our partner what we like. Sometimes it's talking, and sometimes it's actually instructing in a loving way, like, ooh, that feels so good. Ooh, I'd love it if you'd slow down a little bit. I found out I really love my clitoris touched, in a side-to-side motion. Oh my God, can we have fun? Can you try that? It's how men want to please, if we're talking about men and women, men want to please their partners. So a lot of it is like instructing and finding out. And that might be like watching erotica together, or they have sex education videos. It might be, or reading. I think a long time ago when I was dating, I was dating this guy, and he pulled out the book, She Comes First, right? Like Ian Kerner, because he was practicing the techniques in that book. But I thought, power to you, that you're actually trying to figure out women and what they like, what your person likes. So I think it's exploration and willingness to talk and communicate.
Well, and for the woman who's listening who thinks, well, that might be well and good for you, but you don't know my partner. If I were to bring it up, he would get really defensive and standoffish. Or what if you've been in a relationship for a really long time and you basically have a sex script that you follow, and all of a sudden now you're going to be honest and say, you know, that thing that you do every time we have sex, I don't really like it. So how do you address those legitimate fears that women?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote in Conceiving with Love. I interviewed this couple that had been married for like 40 plus years. I go to family camp with them. They're actually both therapists. And they just look in love. They have goo eyes to each other. They have grandkids. And I was like, okay, I like to interview people that are what's working. So I really asked them, like, what makes your relationship, what makes it work? And then also, what makes your intimacy work, more specifically? And they said honesty. That was what they told me. They said honesty is the best policy. We are so honest with each other. And I thought, oh, more people need to hear that. That it's important. Yeah, 30 years if you've been doing it one way, time to change it up. Maybe your partner's bored and doesn't want to say anything. Also, people have these like secret lives that they don't share with their partners. It happens like porn is one of those examples where men are like watching all this porn and women don't even know, and because they're watching all this interesting porn, but with their wives, they're just doing it like a certain way, right? But maybe they're watching this wild porn. That's a fantasy, but maybe they want to experiment a little bit with that with their partner. But it's like we've all separated sexuality and pleasure and exploration and fantasy. We've separated, men separated, women separated. Nobody's talking about what they want, but what a beautiful thing to begin now. What we had, there's nothing like the present moment to just begin that conversation. And yeah, we all have fears that we'll be rejected or someone will go, oh, that's silly, or be angry. But I think that's part of really taking on growing in a relationship. Yeah. And entering a new level.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I always think about is, so I've only ever been in sexual relationships with men, and I have a lot of female friends, and obviously in my professional life as well, where women are in sexual relationships with men. And I feel like I can confidently say that 95 to 99% of the time, the man reaches orgasm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
However, I can't confidently say that 95 to 99% of the time a woman reaches orgasm. So I feel that there's a huge problem with the way that our culture looks at sex, because it's all penis focused. And there's these expectations of women to then act, because the women are acting. So the idea that you could just put your finger inside a woman or just immediately she's going to orgasm and all of the things that you see on TV, they just don't match our biology. So a question out of that is, how important is orgasm? I can't tell you how many times I've heard a woman say something to the effect of, well, I really enjoy sex. It's just orgasm. I don't usually orgasm during sex, but it's not that important to me. I just like the intimacy. Like, I've heard a lot of women minimize the importance of that.
Yeah, I've actually heard the same thing. I think there is such there's such pressure on orgasm. I'm like, first of all, you don't need to orgasm to make a baby, okay? You don't need an orgasm to enjoy sex. Some women don't, but it's kind of this elusive thing, the orgasm. Like, what exactly am it? Women have this big idea of like, it's got to be like mind blowing and you're screaming, right? And maybe they feel something and they don't really know what it is, if that actually is an orgasm. But what an orgasm is all the tissues. We have a lot of erectile tissues like men do in our vulva, like in different parts. It's shown in my book, and they engorge with blood, and the orgasm is the contraction, like sort of the release of that. So it's a physiological thing for women to have. And perhaps, the first thing for women is I'll ask them about their own self-pleasuring if they orgasm with masturbation. And many will orgasm with masturbation, but they don't orgasm with penis inside. So women are, by far, they say, clitoral orgasmers, and are afraid to actually touch themselves or have their partner touch and stimulate their clitoris in the way that will bring them to orgasm, maybe while they're having intercourse. So a lot of it is like, what is the orgasm? And do you need to have some people don't. There's G-spot orgasm. I mean, there's like tons of different kinds of orgasm. Sometimes it's just not enough time for a woman. Maybe they're just not aroused enough, and it can be so many things. I mean, I watched this instructional. Betty Dotson was a big proponent. I don't know if you know her, but she has a website, and she was a big proponent of female orgasm. And she would like coach women, literally stand by them while they were masturbating. On
Wow.
how to, yeah, I know it sounds really really strange. And I watched these videos. Yeah. I watched these videos and I thought, wow, this is just super amazing, right? I just opened my eyes. And she would have them put like she created this like little barbell thing that women would put in them, like small, just to have some containment. And then she would have them rub their clitoris or maybe use a vibrator. And it was just fascinating. She would say like, you can do it. It was like coaching, like keep going. Don't give up now. It was like this idea that women gave up before they were near this elusive orgasm. And then if they kept going, they oftentimes would have some kind of release. And again, the expectations that we're supposed to be like, whoa, I think is sometimes it's just a little thing and women don't know what they're even looking for. So that's orgasm.
Well, that's really interesting. I feel like I've never heard of something like that, of coaching during masturbation. But I mean, it's interesting because you would be hard pressed to find a man who's never brought himself to orgasm through masturbation. But it's not hard to find women who have never done that, and some women who've never had an orgasm at all. And so I think it's really important to normalize there's nothing wrong with the female body. A male body can achieve orgasm, but we have all this porn and all of this male-focused sexual information out there to tell us exactly how to do it. The female orgasm, often called elusive, making it seem like it's challenging and difficult. I often wonder if that's really true because the female body, I mean, physiologically designed to be able to achieve orgasm. For a woman who's listening, who perhaps has not experienced orgasms regularly during penis and vagina intercourse, who may not self-pleasure and may not be able to bring herself to orgasm, but wants to. So we're talking about orgasm and she's like, I'd like to have one of those. I feel like that would be kind of fun, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What should she do? What would you suggest for her?
I think part of it for women is feeling in the mood. We have to be aroused. So I think that some of the things that we can do, and they're in Conceiving with Love, I have this whole self-pleasuring thing about, first of all, is not expecting an orgasm. I mean, I've actually had to take it off the table for women who are so focused on with their partner on achieving this orgasm that they don't. It's like this pressure. And I had a woman just recently that I coached and who was one of my patients who was saying to me that she fakes it with her husband all the time. And I had to put a kibosh on that. It's like, if he's thinking he's pleasuring you and you're getting to orgasm and that's his big goal in life is for you to orgasm, which men, for men, they like that, they're women if they do, then if it's not really, again, honest. So this idea that you have to get there is just like, that's what you're thinking. When you're in your mind having intercourse, you're not in your body. And one of the things about orgasm is not being in the thinking brain. Like, I must orgasm now. When am I going to have my orgasm? It's actually just experience pleasure for pleasure's sake without a goal. That's really the truth. And I feel like if you want to orgasm or you want to learn how to do it, it's self-exploration. You get a vibrator, you get a clitoral massager, you stimulate your breasts. This sounds really weird for some women. I realize some women, it's taboo to touch themselves. It's different in all different cultures and walks of life. But it's breast massage is a beautiful thing, not only for a health of our breasts, but it also is arousing. So I would say for women, do a breast massage. Do it medicinally. Get some essential oils, massage your breasts, and maybe start doing some Kegel exercises, or like where we kind of like, that's where you squeeze and you put a lot of energy into your vulva or in your vagina, where you're kind of bringing energy there, and just breathe. Maybe that's a great start. The inroad of self-pleasuring, and then you could even take it a step further, which is like you get some coconut oil and you begin, if you've never done it, it's nothing like the present, to begin to touch yourself. There's nothing taboo about this. It's our body. It's a temple. It's a beautiful thing. There's nothing wrong with pleasure for women.
Absolutely. And something that you said really resonated because, I mean, thought is like the antithesis of experiencing an orgasm, because when you're thinking about how do I look, how do I smell, I should be having an orgasm, why is it taking so long? All of that, I just love what you said about being in your brain space as opposed to your body. If you want to experience an orgasm, it's not about feeling like that's the goal, but more about tapping into whatever feels good and doing more of that and trying to focus on the feeling. It's almost like a meditation, I would say, to actually just try not to think and just enjoy. And that can help you with that honesty piece.
Yeah.
Because since it takes longer, for instance, you might need repeated stimulation in a certain way for a while in order to start to build up those sensations.
Yeah. I just thought of something when you were talking and I really wanted to address it. And that's like trauma for women. And this idea of like, we're not okay down there. Maybe someone said something once. I mean, I've had it where people have said something and it was like, ugh. It just puts this whole like shame, like especially women, with our smell and our, and what we look like down there. It is a source of where women really do feel like not empowered in their vulvas, in their vaginas, right? And so this idea of really putting love into this area for ourselves and for our partner to be in love, which is this thing like having men should learn to appreciate the vulva. You're beautiful. I love the way you smell. I love the way you taste. These things go a long way. Men, hopefully they're listening. We really want to kind of love that area, right? So often it's shame.
Well, I feel like we should hang out there a little bit because there's a lot of current trends that are super disturbing. I think that, so for instance, I was looking at what was it called? It was a textbook though. I think it was Human Sexuality. Yeah. I don't know which year, but I was looking at the textbook because I read textbooks. Yes, I do. And so in the section about just physiology and anatomy, they had a picture of a man, so a white man, but an actual man. And I say race just because I'm a person of color, so I always find it interesting that there's no people of color represented, but that's a whole other issue. But either way, there was a man who had a penis, and there was a picture of his actual penis. And he had, the hair around his genitalia, just like a regular, good old-fashioned dude, right? But just like, I just want to say that there was an actual picture of an actual man. And then they also had the anatomy of the penis, a drawing. For the female side of it, there was no picture of an actual woman. There was no picture of an actual vulva. There was diagrams and images. But I just found that to be very interesting, that in the Human Sexuality textbook, and that's something that I've experienced many times. I'm an avid reader. I've purchased and read many, many books. And it is very rare to find a book that illustrates female anatomy like what it actually looks when you take a hand mirror and put it between your legs. That's a huge problem because as women, we have our vulvas, we have our labia majora, our labia minora, we have the clitoral hood, and we have different shapes and sizes. And there's this whole movement now to have surgery to minimize the appearance of the different parts of your vulva, because we're trying to match up either with 12-year-old girls' hairless vulva or models in pornography who have had the similar surgery. So this is a little bit of a ramble, but I just want to touch on the fact that as women, we don't even have images of what other women's vulvas look like. So we don't even know. I think a lot of women don't even know that their vulvas are beautiful and perfectly normal, and all women's vulvas look something like yours.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Oh, I actually went, when I was doing my book, I did a lot of research, and there's a book by Nick Karras called Petals. And in this, he's got photographs of all vulvas, of all different color, and it's really incredible for women. And for me, it's empowering to see that they're all different, some with like hair, some with hair, no hair, but all the different shapes and where the clitoris is located. It's a very different location from where the vaginal opening is. Some women have it really close together. Some women have it far apart. Some women have really long labias, and women who have long labias, I've done a lot of sex. I'm a sex coach, so I did a lot of sex research. Sometimes love them tugged on. Like, how sexy would that be to tug on these long labias? But women are, like if they have them, that doesn't look like the porn model. It's like, oh gosh, I got to get these cut, labioplasty. And it's such a crime because it's such a source of pleasure. Mm-hmm. There is so much non-education around sexuality. I mean, MDs only get I think it's about 20 hours in human sexuality, unless they're going into that field. And psychologists get, I think, less than 10. It's unless they're a sex therapist, right? So nobody knows what to speak about it.
And the textbooks aren't accurate. So in your book, you outline the anatomy of the female reproductive anatomy, specifically the vulva and the clitoris and the actual entire clitoris, the internal structure of it. And so fortunately for me, when I was in university, there was a women's center. I talk about this a lot, but there was just these great talks. So I dragged all my roommates to this orgasm talk, and the woman who came to the university so I was probably like 18, and the woman had, pictures and images, and she talked about female ejaculation and really normalized the female anatomy. And I've said, but oftentimes, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So when I was in junior high, part of the non-sex education that I did receive, they put up an image of the vulva, but they didn't even call it a vulva. It was like 2 legs and like a dot for the clitoris and a hole for the vagina. And I remember going home and taking a hand mirror and actually looking at my vulva between my legs, with a hand mirror, and thinking that there was something wrong with my vulva because I didn't have the dot. Like, where's the dot, right? I don't have a dot. And that's just it. So I feel like the book Petals has been mentioned on the podcast before years ago. So I'll make sure to link that in the show notes, because as women, we just don't have the opportunity to see what real vulvas look like. And for any woman who's concerned about that also, I would suggest following the vulva gallery, I think it's called, on Instagram.
Yeah.
Because she is an artist, and women send in pictures of their vulvas in it. So it's not like spread eagle, but what you look like when you're standing in front of the mirror, if you were to do a selfie of your vulva selfie. And especially to address the women who feel that their labia are too long and feel shame in that, because when you follow the vulva gallery, you see that vulvas come in all shapes and sizes. Labia come in all, sometimes they're uneven, sometimes they're longer, sometimes they're shorter. It's just how we're made.
Yeah, I think we're all really beautiful. We're all individual. And I took a training where they were talking about the different shapes, and they labeled them, and they would talk about, and I talk about this in my book a little bit, about how different anatomy leads to different kind of pleasure. And there's like the different anatomy, not only pleasure, but things that you want. Like some women like different positions and like to do lots of different experimentation. It's based on somewhat of their anatomy. Like, how fascinating, and men are different as well. Men are different anatomy. No two penises really look alike either.
Yeah.
So we're all different and beautiful. And the fact that it's again, getting rid of the shame. I think that's the big thing around our sexuality. It's allowing pleasure, allowing us to really stand up as women to be who we are and not to try to make it into something else.
Well, just imagine that you were not created and designed and put on this earth just to please men and to ensure that they have happy orgasms. Some of the common behaviors, such as faking it, because you mentioned that, and that's a thing, feeling a pressure to pretend to have an orgasm for your partner so that he feels good about himself. And that's very, very common.
Yes.
Men can't really fake orgasms. They might be able to.
Actually.
Okay, you're right. Yes, you're right.
I have to say.
You're right. No, you're right. I just feel like it would be less common, and with the anatomy, but I get what you're saying. But at the same time, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, just imagine for a moment if you were not put on this earth as a woman to look a certain way, to fit into a certain mold, to please a man, and to fit into whatever society has told us that we're supposed to be doing for men. And what if you were put here just to have your own experience? And what if your body is absolutely perfect and beautiful just the way that it is? And what if you were able to embrace your own body, your own vulva, your own labia, and just really explore what feels good for you? Like, what if that was okay?
Yeah, I mean, and credit to men. I think I was just at a party talking to a man, and we were talking about sexuality. Of course, it's a favorite topic of mine these days. And of course, it's a normal topic for me. And he was like in his exploration phase. He had kids already, and he was talking about I'm just really interested in intimacy and really like slowing things down. It's like sex is good, but I only want to know like about touch and about pleasing women, is what he said to me. And I thought, yeah, that's right. That's great. Men are starting to question what they've learned and really are exploring what more about, they want to be touched and loved and caressed as well. we do too. In other words, it's a mutual thing. It's a give and take. And it's about touch and caressing, and we've lost that seduction and whispering in ears and all of that, as a mutual thing.
I wanted to jump into today's episode to invite you to join us for the next round of Fertility Awareness Mastery, my 10-week group coaching program designed to help you unlock the secrets of your menstrual cycle. Fertility Awareness Mastery teaches you everything you need to know about using fertility awareness cycle tracking to achieve your intentions. Whether you're currently trying to get pregnant, avoiding pregnancy, or planning to conceive in the future, we've got you covered. This program goes deep. Get to the root of your period problems, hormone imbalances, fertility challenges, and so much more. Early bird registration is now open for a limited time. Make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program to register today. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. Now let's jump back into today's episode. Well, and you said something earlier. You said something to the effect of the shame that we often carry if somebody had said something negative about our vulvas, or if we have concerns about how we smelled. I recently posted about just taking care of your vulva and hygiene, and how when you wash the inner folds of your vulva with soap, it can actually increase your risk of infection because it just kills the natural bacteria floral balance that we have down there. And the responses were very interesting. Over the years working with women, a lot of women were taught by their mothers to wash with soap. And there's often this fear, this terror, like this fear that if I don't wash really good with soap down there, that I'm going to smell and all of that kind of stuff. So what's really interesting when you learn about the menstrual cycle and the hormones and your cervical fluid, I've had women comment to me, especially when they start charting or when they come off the pill, that they notice that they have a scent and it's more pronounced around the time of ovulation, and they're very concerned about this. And I'm like, wait a minute, just to give you a sense of like my world, there are women who actually like will touch their cervical fluid and put it on like cologne, like lotion, like they'll put it on, like they'll put it, I'm touching my behind my ears. Of course, listeners can't see that, or they'll put it like behind their, just like how you would apply perfume. Like there are women who do that.
Wow.
Because when
Love
you're
it.
because when you're in your fertile window, you're putting out all kinds of pheromones. It's proven in the research that
yes, it is.
It's out of your control, but men are more attracted to you during that time. It's not even something you can do anything about. And for any woman who's been cycling naturally for a while, if your partner, say for instance, if you and your partner engage in oral sex, your partner would be able to tell where you are in your cycle, because there's times when you actually taste sweeter, there's times when you taste a little bit more bitter, and that's related to the changes in your vaginal pH. But there's kind of this idea that it's so gross down there, we should be ashamed of it. And I found that men like it because it's part of just the biology, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the deal, is getting over feeling comfortable enough in our bodies to allow pleasure without this shame about what we taste like and smell like. Because yes, I was, my mother douched, she had this little thing where she cleaned out that whole area. So that's what I was taught. I never did. But even to take it a step further, like I did all this research on lubricants, like what we put in, that in our vagina, and to really make sure we put in quality things, especially during the window where we ovulate, because we want to keep our pH of our vagina acidic. We don't want it to be alkaline. That's where bacteria starts to grow. And so like people use, there's all these bad lubrications with parabens and have this kind of thing called osmolality, which is this idea that it pulls water, to get it lubricated, it pulls the water out of your tissues. And so it really dries out our tissues if we get these high osmolality lubricants, like cheap lubricants. So always be careful what you put inside you as well. And that we don't need to put perfumes, and we don't need to do any of that. We are beautiful. Some women will actually take it and like, I'll have them, taste it, taste their, it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't taste that bad, because we're so afraid down there of what we taste like, that it does make oral sex, you can't relax, you can't enjoy it because you're like worried that you smell, it is this shame that we've carried for generations around about that. And it's time to like start to unwind that and break that. Yeah, men like it. Men need to tell us.
Yeah. So it's kind of like this myth that it's just disgusting. And if a guy's going down there, it's like this thing that he's doing talk to men. Don't take my word for it. Everyone who's listening has men in your life in whatever capacity. So if there's a friend, a cousin, a brother, whoever, a partner who you're comfortable enough to just ask these types of questions to, just ask, like, do you think it's gross? Do you enjoy it? And yes, there's all kinds of negative connotations about that particular thing. So there's definitely a category of men who would say, I would never do that, whatever. But talking to just good old woman, vagina and vulva loving men. And I think you'd be surprised to find that the average man it's just a part of, again, there are pheromones, there are all these biological functions that are designed to make men want to be around you when you're fertile. It's very interesting. And I just wanted to point out one of the things that you said, the vagina, the natural flora of the vagina is absolutely acidic most of the time and naturally a little bit more alkaline when you're in your fertile window.
Absolutely,
so
yes.
There are lubes that women use when they have concerns about their cervical fluid that would be matching that alkaline.
Yes.
Period. But it would be helpful to use that within your window and not without, not around.
Yeah,
don't
use
that's
the
a whole
other
other
time.
thing.
Yeah. But and also to if you're not producing cervical fluid, right? If you're not, then there are things you can do. Like I do herbs and nutritionals to help women so that they do produce cervical fluids. To get your body so it is producing, unless you've had surgery. Sometimes you've had some types of surgery on your cervix that will prevent you from making cervical fluid.
Well, and so I had a couple other questions that I wanted to ask you. I'll try to ask one at a time instead, because I feel the urge to combine them. But for women, because you mentioned surgery, so for women that have had surgeries, so there's more information growing. You mentioned earlier, we talked about how there's different types of orgasm, clitoral orgasm, G-spot orgasm, and there's cervical orgasm and just all the different things. And so there's this kind of misunderstanding that we don't have any nerve endings in our cervix, and it's not, or our vulva, as you mentioned, and our labia. So I guess just a question for you, for women who have experienced some sort of trauma, so whether that is that they did have surgery or something that has interfered with their sexual function, or for women who experience pain with intercourse or have experienced pain, and now the thought of intercourse is kind of tied up with this fear of experiencing pain. How have you found that to affect the sexual relationship between a couple, and how do you support women and couples?
That's a great question. I just gave a lecture on vulvodynia, which is part of a pain in that area just recently. I think it's a combination of factors. I'm an acupuncturist. So as for acupuncture, I can treat some of these things, not by going inside, but by actually helping everybody relax and increase blood flow and so forth and so on. And then I refer to a pelvic floor specialist, would be a person, or maybe a sex therapist also. Feel like there's so much taboo around sex therapy. People are like, I don't want to see a sex therapist. I don't have that many issues, but sometimes it's really needed. These people really study human sexuality. And so the combination of the pelvic floor physical therapist, a sex therapist, and I also I have a background in this, so helping women to feel relaxed and feel comfortable and deal with some old trauma and any other types of trauma. Working with trauma, really, there's a lot of ways to do that in terms of mind-body connection, EMDR and certain things. The combination of those things should help a woman heal from that. I have women that can't have intercourse because of trauma. I had a woman who got bladder infections every time she had sex, and it turned out that she had vaginismus. Her vagina just would contract and wouldn't let anything in because she was so afraid of having a bladder infection. And she's happily married. So those type of situations need, we have to almost take intercourse off the table and have but it doesn't mean that men and women can't pleasure each other. There's so much more to that, and get the woman back comfortable with a small little finger, and just generally get her back into health around intercourse. So that's kind of the way I go about it.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I always feel the need to mention in conversations about painful sex or even libido issues is that often there's a discussion kind of in the world of sexual health and sexual therapy and things like that around all the emotional reasons why women may have issues in those areas. And from my research as well, women who are on hormonal birth control are on much much more likely to experience pain with sex or lower
Yes.
libido. So I just
Yes.
wonder how you address that in your practice. Is that something that you look at right away to see if women do have this history of hormonal birth control because it's known to suppress testosterone and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, yes. I look at all those things, and I like to also have them get checked out by an OBGYN because I'm an acupuncturist. I don't go down there. I don't look in that area to see, some people have autoimmune conditions, like in sclerosis in that area. There's lots of reasons and or infections. People sometimes have undiagnosed infections for years. And I feel like it's really important to really have a gynecologist do a look-see and make sure everything's good. And then we do discuss birth control pills. I'm not a big fan. I mean, it really is good birth control, but I'm just not a big fan of birth control pills for women. So oftentimes when women come to see me, if they're having issues, and they're trying to get pregnant anyway, so they usually get off the birth control pill.
Well, I just asked because I feel like there's this stigma, and it's kind of like there's an expectation that women don't like sex as much as men do, and that women don't have as high of a sex drive as men do, and that women are more likely to not want to do it and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like the societal kind of misconceptions and like basically myths and lies about women's
Yes.
sexuality set us up not to be treated. So I love what you said because this is a physical part of our body, and there's no reason to think like if your arm wasn't working properly or if your ear wasn't working properly or if your vision goes, we don't immediately jump to like there's a trauma and you have an emotional issue. We look at the physical first. And so I love what you said because yes, get thee to the OB, get yourself tested, rule out infections, try to make sure that there's nothing physical going on. This is a physical part of our bodies. How can we automatically always go to the it must be emotional and we need to have talk therapy when sometimes it's quite literally a physical issue or the birth control pill suppressing your libido and making sex painful, or a surgery or a procedure that you had that had an impact on it. So I just love this.
There's scar tissue in there. Sometimes people have scar tissue. Some people have little polyps that need to be removed of their cervix. I mean, there are things that happen to women, and there are fixes. I think that's the most important thing. There are fixes to everything. OBGYNs use hormone cream for people who have pain. It's a good fix, and spend time with women trying to look at all the areas. I mean, as a Chinese medicine practitioner, we look at mind, body, and spirit, and there's no separation. So everything has a connection, and we want to address everything together.
Well, and a question for you. So the topic of, say, jade eggs has been in the ether, and people talk about these things. And one of the things that you mentioned at one point in our conversation today was how sometimes it's important to just get our focus back into our body. And so some women, for example, would report that, so I'm not an expert on jade eggs, but they're small, egg-looking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what to call them, but small, they look like eggs, basically. But you insert them into your vagina and hold them there throughout the day. And so for however long. But one of the thought processes behind something like that is for a lot of women, when there's something in there, it forces you to just feel that area and to have that kind of physical reminder of this part of your body that you might be so disconnected to. So I feel like for a lot of women, that may be one of the ways to reconnect. I just want to know what your thoughts are on that and other similar strategies.
Yeah, I think jade egg is a really beautiful practice, but the problem with jade egg and it is, first of all, it is sanitary. You boil it. It's jade. It's not porous. It's you can get them. They have a little hole with a string. You can put some dental floss and pull it out if you need to. That for women who have too tight of an area, sometimes squeezing, it's a muscle. We have a muscle here in our vagina. And if you squeeze it too tight and you make it really, really, really tight, that's overworking it and it's not good. So the thing about jade egg is it's a balance. You don't want to carry, it's like people are like, yeah, I did jade egg and I did yoga with it. And, all right, well, that's cool. But the idea is to have a balance between relaxation and tension. It's a balance in our muscles, like all of our muscles, right? When we want them to be able to relax when they're relaxed, and we want them to use them when we need them. So the same thing with vagina. I think it's a great practice of doing it. I had a teacher who had you keep it in all night when you're sleeping. It's like this jade egg practice of sleeping. So here I am, I got my jade egg already, and I put it in, and I was like, oh no, I am not sleeping with this all night. And it was like, out it goes. But it was a great practice of putting it in, but I just didn't want to have it all night in me. So it's a very personal, finding your balance, finding your rhythm, just inserting and seeing how it feels. Right. Just awakening that area for some women is miraculous. It's different for everyone. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate how you address that. It's very similar to a conversation that I had with Isa Herrera, and I'll link that episode to this one, because she talked about the problem of, and this again is society. So I think of it, and I actually think of it in terms of what it can do to connect you to your vulva. I'm not thinking of it as like a way to tighten your vagina. So when I was talking about that and you brought that up, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what we're using it for. But that's exactly, so I'm really happy that you talked about that, because again, then there's another societal expectation that your vagina needs to be tight. And there's this whole idea that when you have a baby, it ruins your body. And all of a sudden you need to do things to make your vagina tight. I've had 2 babies. Me too. If anyone's curious, my vagina is just fine. And I didn't have to do anything to it.
Me too.
It's just totally fine. So those are myths.
Too.
Yeah. Those are myths. So I really appreciate that. So Isa, she talked about how, again, the societal expectation of needing a tight vagina, and again, so that you exist for male pleasure, right, causes us exactly what you said. Like, we need both the contraction and the relaxation.
And the relaxation. Yes.
So she talked about, I think, dilators. Again, this is not my area of specialization, but other practices to also allow for the vagina to relax and to feel both the opened and like both of those muscles have to be worked. So
yes.
So yeah, go back and listen to the other episode. I'm sure you talk about that a little bit more in your book. And so it's just important so for me, when I brought that up, I just want to clarify for the listeners, I was thinking more in terms of ways that you could connect back to your physical body, because I know in my practice, and I'm sure you found it in your practice, that many women are very disconnected from that area.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so that leads me into, I suppose it'll be the last question for the day, most likely. But one of the things that you talked about quite a bit in the book is intimacy, and how that doesn't always mean intercourse. We've touched on it a little bit today, but I want to go into that a little bit more, because it kind of, I feel like it goes quite in line with everything that we've been talking about. For women, in order for us to really embrace pleasure and to be in our bodies and just enjoy, fully be present, fully enjoy, fully be honest about our sexual experiences and have better ones, have better orgasms, I feel like intimacy is a big piece of that. So I'm just curious as to how can we have more intimacy?
Yeah, I mean, intimacy is a big topic. I was actually thinking about, when you were talking about this sort of awakening our chakras, I have a chakra meditation in Conceiving with Love, and this idea that, I've watched people have orgasms by themselves, whole body orgasms. Like, it's not just, and then doing it with their partner, just by connecting and moving energy from the different parts of their body, breathing into their partner, like inhaling and then exhaling together, and pushing their belly buttons together and their chests together. And it was just amazing that you could have that type of intimacy with your partner without actually physically having intercourse. Of course, people who are baby making, you need the physical intercourse, but intimacy is it is that, right? It's looking into each other's eyes and really seeing each other. How many people it's even like when you're making love, don't look, we can't look. We're just sort of in our own space. But what if you look at your partner when you're making love? Just look at each other's eyes. Maybe you can't sustain it the whole time, but to really see them. What if you have intimacy of just holding hands during the day, or cooking together, or touching each other, trying different kinds of touch, or intimacy even in, just telling about what you feel or talking about what you need. I mean, intimacy is so much more than sexuality. It's about honesty and communication, and sometimes it's about forgiveness. That's a big, huge thing, right? We hold on to so much resentments. I mean, myself included, right? Of just I hold on, I'm like, oh, so angry, he did this. And then we don't practice daily forgiveness and gratitude to our partner. I talk about that a lot in my book, about gratitude as the antidote for fear, just being grateful and forgiveness. It gets in the way. all these resentments get in the way, and they build a bridge. They build a bridge that they put a, wait a minute, they destroy the bridge that is not they build, they destroy the bridge to intimacy, because when you're right.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you're out there and you're holding on to resentments of your partner, it's a great time to begin to let them go, find out what they are, acknowledge them, and let them go. And sometimes we have to do ceremonies. Sometimes we have to be with our partner and spend a day, walking and throwing stones and, really getting into what we've been holding on to. Honesty. I think that's a great way to build intimacy.
Well, and as you were saying that, I just couldn't help but think of, so for instance, couples who they have followed a sexual script for quite a while, and perhaps the woman who's listening right now hasn't been as vocal about what she wants. And so she has a lot of that, well, he's not going to do it, or like all of that kind of stuff going on. And so in order to really get to that place where you can experience pleasure, you have to let all of that go and just try something new. And that's easier said than done. But I just thought of that when you were talking about forgiveness as well.
It's really, sometimes it's about writing letters to ourselves and, burning them and, going and doing ceremony, actual ceremony. It's that way with miscarriage. Sometimes a lot of women, they have so much, they feel so bad and so sad and mourn and grieve. It's like doing a ceremony of together and letting go allows for more intimacy because we're doing this together. So letting go of the past, welcoming in a future, trying something different. Life is short. What we really all crave is to be loved and to love. Really, we all want to be loved and loved. We want to connect with our hearts. That's what intimacy is. And the best, to me, and the best intimacy and sexuality is when our hearts actually connect to our loins. And they are connected in Chinese medicine. It's this beautiful, like, I love you and I want to please you and I want to touch you and I want to show you my love in this deep way that I can, that's to me is deep intimacy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like we've come full circle, because at the beginning of the call, you talked about even the female kind of arousal cycle, how it typically takes a bit longer for us to become aroused and for us to want to do it. And it just reminded me. So when I was very young, I've always been this way. I've always been a nerd. And I went to I was an adult. I moved out the house. I was going to university, right? I'm an industrious woman. So I got myself to the library and I bought a couple books about sex because I just wanted to know. And I remember I bought a book, and it was like a couples book. And I bought it because it looked like this is how adults would talk about sex. Like it was a very like a book and I was not in a relationship. I just bought this book. And I remember one of the things that they talked about in the book was, it was something like non-demand sexual touching, but it really talked about intimacy and all the different ways that you could connect with your partner. Obviously, like penis and vagina intercourse, if you're into it, is great, right? Like if you have sex with someone of the opposite sex, and but at the same time, it's really helpful to know that it's not the only hors d'oeuvre on the menu or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So for the women who have struggled with trauma, so however that looks, you mentioned your client who just had such a severe reaction to penetration that it would cause her to have bladder infections. There are women listening who suffer from pelvic pain and who've had different types of procedures done and who have experienced painful sex for years, for whom it's just a thing that they've had to just cope with in their relationship. So I suppose this would be a good place to end on, but what would you want to say to them so that they can still work towards experiencing intimacy and pleasure, even though they're having these challenges? Maybe penetrative sex is painful for them.
What I want to say is there's always help in all sorts of things. And one of the things I found most interesting when I was doing all this sexual research was that the vagus nerve, which is the 10th cranial nerve, actually goes to our clitoris. And there are some studies that show that women who are like paraplegic actually can get the clitoris stimulation, even though they don't feel, can register. And they're like, why does this register? Because the spine is severed, but it's because of the vagus nerve, which also is the parasympathetic, which makes us feel relaxed and good in our body, right? It's like we talk about the vagus nerve in my field because we can access it by pressing on a point in the ear. But I want to say to women, yes, there's always help. I mean, it's sexuality is such a beautiful experience, and it's much more than penis and vagina. Some women can have an orgasm with their breast or their back, or, I mean, it doesn't have to be, they get pleasure. We get pleasure in being touched. We are touch creatures. So don't give up. Don't give up.
Wonderful. I love that. Amazing words to end on. Denise, thank you so much for being here. I could have just talked your ear off for another couple of hours, obviously, because I just kept going.
Me too. I just love this. I love talking about this. It's so needed.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Where can the listeners go to learn more about you, what you do, and grab a copy of your book, Conceiving with Love, A Whole Body Approach to Creating Intimacy, Reigniting Passion, and Increasing Fertility?
I mean, it's on Amazon.com, and but you can go to my website, which is DenisewieSner.com, DeniseWiesner.com, and actually, if you put your information, you can download a chapter 1 free of my book. So then there's more information on how to get the book on the audio. There's places to go for audio of the book as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was really just a fun interview, very informative, and I know that my audience is going to love it.
Oh, thank you so much. It was lovely for me.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/287. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Denise. It was such a treat having her on the show and really delving into some of the most important aspects of sex and pleasure, and really letting go and enjoying our birthright, essentially. For those of you who listened to the show for a while, you know that I often talk about birth control and this, specifically the sexual side effects associated with it, namely low libido, and some women experience pain with sex and difficulty to orgasm. And this is something that as a culture, we often think is just a normal part of being a woman, having difficulty orgasming, having issues with sex, not really enjoying it that much, not really having much of a libido. And those are all myths. And so, at any opportunity I have, I think it's really important for us to talk about sex and really demythify a lot of our just standard cultural values about sex, and specifically around women and our experience of sex, and to call out some of the tendencies we may have to ensure that our partners receive pleasure, particularly if you are partnered to a male, while downplaying your own need for pleasure. And so hopefully this episode gave you some encouragement in this area. Just a reminder that early bird registration is now open for Fertility Awareness Mastery. I'm so excited to be starting January 2020 strong. For those of you who have been waiting to hear when the next round of Fertility Awareness Mastery is going to start, we are going to be starting within the first couple weeks of January, and I'm really excited, and I really hope that you join us. Whether you are currently actively trying to conceive and wanting to get a really good understanding of what's happening in your cycles hormonally and do everything you can to optimize your chances of conceiving naturally, or whether you're actively avoiding pregnancy if you're in that transition phase coming off birth control and really wanting to feel confident in your ability to use fertility awareness effectively to avoid pregnancy until you are ready to conceive, or whether you're planning to get pregnant in the near future, so you're avoiding pregnancy now, but really wanting to improve your cycle health, whether it's post-pill or just in general, balance your hormones and improve your overall cycle parameters and health. Whatever your goals are, we have a spot for you in the group. Make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program to register today. Early bird registration is only going to be available for a couple of weeks. So if you're wanting to join us at the lowest possible price, make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program. And with that said, I want to thank you for spending some time with us today and for tuning into the show. I appreciate all of you for being part of the Fertility Friday community and for sharing the show and certain episodes with your friends. If you feel that if there's someone in your life who you know would benefit from hearing today's episode, please do share it, fertilityfriday.com/287. And so I hope that you enjoy the rest of your weekend, whenever you're listening to this episode. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.